My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 62 years old. I've spent most of my life trying to do the right thing, even when the right thing wasn't always the easy thing. But nothing prepared me for the moment when my father looked at me with confusion in his eyes and asked why I'd arrived at his house in an Uber instead of the silver SUV he and my mother had given me for my 50th birthday. Let me take you back to that afternoon because understanding what happened requires knowing the whole story. It was a crisp October Saturday when I pulled up to my parents' home in that Uber. The leaves were turning golden and red just like they did every year in our small Michigan town. I'd lived here my whole life, raised my own children here, and watched as the neighborhood slowly changed around us. Some things stayed the same though. My parents still lived in the same brick house they'd bought in 1973. The oak tree in the front yard had grown so tall that its branches now reached the second-floor windows. I paid the driver and stepped out onto the familiar driveway. The concrete was cracked in places, and I made a mental note to talk to my dad about getting it fixed before winter came. He was 78 now, and my mother was 76. They were both still sharp as tacks, but the little things around the house were starting to pile up. My father was standing on the porch, holding the screen door open. He was wearing his usual weekend outfit, khaki pants and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. His hair was completely white now, but his eyes were the same bright blue I remembered from childhood. Those eyes could see right through you, could tell when you were hiding something or hurting inside. "Margaret," he called out, and then his face changed. Confusion crossed his features, then concern. "Why are you arriving in an Uber? What happened to the SUV we bought you for your 50th birthday?" I'd been dreading this question for weeks. I'd practiced what I would say, how I would explain it, but now that the moment was here, my carefully prepared words seemed to dissolve. I opened my mouth to speak, and before I could stop myself, the truth came tumbling out in a way I hadn't intended. "Her sister needed it more," I said quietly. The words hung in the air like frost on a winter morning. My father's face went still. Behind him I heard footsteps, and then my mother appeared in the doorway. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel, her silver hair pulled back in the same style she'd worn for 30 years. When she saw my face, when she heard what I'd said, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, knowing one that reached her eyes. My father stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Then something shifted in his expression. The confusion melted away, replaced by something deeper, something that made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. He didn't say anything. He simply opened his arms. I walked up those 3 porch steps and into my father's embrace, and I felt like I was 10 years old again, coming home after a hard day at school. He held me tight, and I could smell his familiar scent, Old Spice and coffee and the faint trace of the wood polish he used in his workshop. "Come inside," my mother said softly. I just made tea. We settled into the living room, the same room where I'd spent countless hours as a child, where I'd brought my own children to visit their grandparents, where life's big moments had always been discussed and dissected. The furniture was the same, the photographs on the walls were the same, even the clock on the mantel was the same, still ticking away the seconds with its gentle, steady rhythm. My mother poured tea into the good china cups, the ones with the tiny roses. Painted on the sides, she handed me one, and I wrapped my hands around it, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "Tell us," my father said. He wasn't demanding. He was simply opening a door, letting me know it was safe to walk through. So I told them. "My younger sister's name is Susan. She's 58, 4 years younger than me. We grew up together in this house, shared a bedroom until I left for college, fought over clothes and boys, and whose turn it was to do the dishes. Like most siblings, we went through phases of being close and phases of being distant. But we always came back to each other, always found our way home." Susan had married young, at 22, to a man named David, who seemed charming and successful. They'd had 3 children together, and for years, everything looked perfect from the outside. Nice house, good jobs, kids in sports and music lessons. The American dream, right there in living color. But about 5 years ago, cracks started to show. David's business hit some rough patches. Money got tight. Susan went back to work full-time, taking a job at the hospital as an administrative assistant. She never complained, never asked for help, just kept her head down and worked. Then, 2 years ago, David left. Just walked out one day and didn't come back. The divorce was messy and expensive. Susan ended up with the house, but also with most of the debt. The kids were older by then, but 2 of them were in college and the expenses kept piling up. I tried to help where I could. My husband Tom and I were comfortable. We'd both worked hard, saved well, and our own kids were grown and independent. But Susan was proud. She didn't want handouts. She didn't want to feel like a burden. About 6 months ago, Susan's car finally gave up. It was an old Honda with over 200,000 miles on it. The mechanic told her it would cost more to fix than the car was worth. She needed a vehicle to get to work, to help her youngest daughter who was still living at home and attending community college. Susan called me on a Thursday evening. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of one more problem piling onto all the others. "I don't know what to do, Maggie," she said. She hadn't called me Maggie since we were kids. "I can't afford a car payment right now. I've looked at used cars, but even those are so expensive. I've been taking the bus, but it adds an hour each way to my commute, and I'm just so tired." I listened to my sister, heard the tremor in her voice that she was trying so hard to hide, and I thought about the SUV sitting in my garage. The beautiful silver SUV that my parents had given me with so much love and pride on my 50th birthday. Tom and I had 2 cars. He had his truck that he used for work, and I had the SUV. But I'd recently started working from home most days. I was a freelance editor, and most of my work could be done from my home office. When I did need to go somewhere, I could easily use Tom's truck or call an Uber. The SUV mostly sat in the garage, getting driven maybe once or twice a week for grocery shopping or errands. That night, I talked to Tom about it. We sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd made so many decisions over our 35 years of marriage. "I want to give Susan the SUV," I said. Tom didn't hesitate. "Then give it to her. But it was a gift from my parents. What will they think?" Tom reached across the table and took my hand. "They'll think they raised a daughter who knows what really matters." Still, I worried. The SUV had been such a generous gift. My parents had saved for it, had been so excited to surprise me on my birthday. They'd driven it home themselves. A big red bow on the hood, all our family gathered around to celebrate. I didn't want them to think I didn't appreciate it, that I'd just given away their love and generosity without a second thought. But every time I thought about Susan taking that long bus ride, tired and worried and trying to hold everything together, my decision became clearer. I called Susan the next day. "I want you to have my SUV," I said. There was silence on the other end of the line. "Then Maggie, I can't accept that." "Yes, you can, please. Let me do this for you. But Mom and Dad gave you that car. What will they say?" "Let me worry about that. Please, Susan, you need it more than I do. It's just sitting in my garage while you're struggling. That doesn't make sense." We went back and forth for another 20 minutes. Susan cried. I cried. Finally, she agreed. The next Saturday, Tom and I drove the SUV over to Susan's house. She lived about 30 miles away, in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Her house was small but tidy, the lawn neatly mowed, flowers still blooming in the beds along the front walk. When we pulled up, Susan came out onto the porch. Her face was a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read. Relief, gratitude, something that might have been shame or embarrassment. "You don't have to feel bad about this," I told her as I handed her the keys. "Family helps family. That's what we do." Susan hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'll pay you back somehow," she whispered. "You already have, just by being my sister." I didn't tell our parents right away. I kept meaning to, kept planning the right time and the right words. But weeks turned into months. When they asked about the SUV, I'd give vague answers. It was in the shop. I was letting a friend borrow it. I'd started taking Ubers because of environmental concerns. Each little lie made the next one easier, but also made the weight heavier. I knew I couldn't avoid the truth forever, but I also all didn't find the courage to face whatever disappointment they might feel. And then came this Saturday, when I'd promised to help my mother sort through some old boxes in the attic. I'd called an Uber without thinking, and there was my father on the porch, asking the question I'd been dreading. When I finished telling them the story, the living room was quiet except for the ticking of that old clock. My tea had gone cold in my hands. I couldn't look at my parents, couldn't bear to see disappointment in their faces. Then my father spoke. "Margaret Louise Chen," he said, using my full name the way he did when I was a child, and he had something important to say. "Look at me." I raised my eyes to his. There were tears on his cheeks. My father, who never cried, who prided himself on being strong and stoic, had tears running down his face. "Do you know why we gave you that SUV?" he asked. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "We gave it to you because we love you, because we wanted you to be safe and comfortable, because seeing our children happy brings us joy." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "But you just taught us something. You showed us that the best gifts are the ones that keep giving. That love isn't about keeping things for ourselves, but about passing them on to where they're needed most." My mother set down her teacup and came to sit beside me on the couch. She took my hand in both of hers. "Your sister is our daughter too," she said. "We've watched her struggle, and it's broken our hearts. We wanted to help, but she wouldn't let us. You found a way to help her without making her feel small. That takes wisdom and compassion." "We should have told you," I said, my voice cracking. "I should have told you right away. I'm sorry I kept it from you." My father shook his head. "You told us when you were ready. That's enough." He stood up and walked over to the old secretary desk in the corner of the room. From one of the drawers, he pulled out a checkbook. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm writing you a check," he said simply. "Dad, no. That's not why I told you. I don't want money." He kept writing. "This check isn't for you, it's for Susan. The money we would have spent helping her if she'd let us. I want you to give it to her. Tell her it's from all of us, her family who loves her. She won't accept it," I said. "Then you'll have to be as stubborn as you were about the SUV," my mother said with a small smile. "Sounds like persistence runs in this family." My father finished writing the check and handed it to me. When I saw the amount, I gasped. "Dad, this is too much. It's not nearly enough for what she's been through, but it's a start." He sat back down in his chair, and suddenly he looked his age, tired but peaceful. "You know, when you girls were growing up, we tried to teach you right from wrong. We tried to show you what it means to be a good person. But sometimes I wonder if we did enough, if we said the right things." "You did everything right," I said quickly. "Maybe, but today, seeing what you did for your sister, knowing that you sacrificed something precious to you because someone else needed it more, that tells me we must have done something right. You made us proud, Margaret, not because of what you achieved or what you own, but because of who you are." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They came in a rush, years of stress and worry and love all mixed together. My mother held me while I cried, rocking me gently the way she had when I was small. When I finally composed myself, my father cleared his throat. "Now then," he said, "about those boxes in the attic. They're not going to sort themselves. But first, I'm calling Susan and telling her to come to dinner tomorrow. No arguments, no excuses. It's time this family sat down together." That night, after Tom picked me up and we drove home, I sat in our kitchen and called my sister. I told her everything, about the conversation with our parents, about the check, about the dinner invitation. Susan cried again, but this time they were different tears. "I felt so alone," she admitted. "I know I have you and Tom, and I know Mom and Dad care, but I felt like I was drowning and couldn't let anyone see. Accepting your car was so hard. I felt like a failure." "You're not a failure. You're one of the strongest people I know. You've been holding everything together for your kids, working 2 jobs sometimes, never complaining." That's not failure, that's heroism. It doesn't feel heroic, it feels exhausting. I know. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Let us help. Let us be your family. The next evening, we all gathered at our parents' house for dinner. Susan brought her youngest daughter, Emily, who was 20 and still finding her way in the world. Emily had her mother's strength and her grandmother's kindness. Watching 3 generations of strong women in one room made my heart swell. My mother had made pot roast, the same meal she'd made for every important family dinner for as long as I could remember. The smell filled the house, mixing with the scent of fresh bread and apple pie. We sat around the old dining room table, the one with the scratches and marks from years of family meals. My father said grace, thanking God for family and second chances and the gift of another day together. As we ate, we talked, really talked, the way families should but don't always remember to do. Susan told us about her job, about the challenges and the small victories. Emily talked about her classes, about her dreams of becoming a teacher. My parents shared stories from their own struggles when they were young. Stories I'd never heard before about hard times and difficult choices. We almost lost this house once, my father said. It was 1981. The recession hit hard. I'd been laid off from the factory, and your mother was working part-time at the grocery store. We were 3 months behind on the mortgage. I never knew that, I said. We didn't want you girls to worry. But we were terrified. This house was everything to us. It was where we were raising our family, where we'd put down roots. What happened? Susan asked. My brother, your Uncle Frank, found out somehow. He showed up one day with a check for the full amount we owed. Said it was a loan, that we could pay him back whenever we were able. We tried to refuse, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. Said that's what family does. My mother nodded, her eyes distant with memory. We paid him back over the next few years, little by little. But we never forgot what he did for us. It wasn't just about the money. It was about knowing someone believed in us, that we weren't alone. Uncle Frank passed away 10 years ago, my father continued. Before he died, I tried to thank him again for what he'd done. You know what he said? He said, John, you thanked me every time you opened your door to someone who needed help. You thanked me by being the kind of man who would do the same for someone else. The table was quiet, then Susan spoke, her voice soft but steady. I've been so ashamed that my marriage failed, ashamed that I couldn't provide better for my kids, ashamed that I needed help. But sitting here, listening to all of you, I realize that needing help isn't shameful, it's human. And accepting help with grace might be one of the hardest and most important things we can learn to do. My father reached across the table and took Susan's hand. Your marriage didn't fail. Sometimes relationships end, and that's nobody's fault. You didn't fail your children. Look at Emily, sitting right here. Look at your other 2 kids, working hard, making their way in the world. They learned strength from watching you. They learned perseverance. Those are gifts that will serve them their whole lives. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Emily sat on the floor near her grandmother, looking at old photo albums. Susan and I sat together on the couch, our father in his usual chair, the lamp casting a warm glow over the room. I have something for you, I said to Susan, pulling out the check my father had written. She looked at it and immediately tried to hand it back. I can't take this. Yes, you can, my father said firmly. Consider it an early inheritance. Your mother and I talked about it, and we'd rather give you this money now when you need it than have you wait until we're gone. Money sitting in a bank doesn't help anyone. Money being used to ease a burden, to give someone breathing room, that's money well spent. But it's too much, Susan protested. It's not enough, my mother corrected her gently. We wish we could do more. But this will help with some of the debt, give you a cushion. You can focus on yourself for a change, maybe take that vacation you've been putting off maybe, just sleep a little easier at night. Susan looked at the check again, then at all of us. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't think I deserved it. Oh, sweetheart, my mother said, moving to sit beside her and wrapping her in a hug. You always deserved it. Always. That night marked a turning point for our family. We started having dinner together once a month, all of us making the time no matter how busy life got. Susan slowly paid down her debts, and with the financial pressure easing, she started to smile more, to laugh more. The worry lines around her eyes began to fade. Emily graduated from community college and got accepted to the state university. On the day we helped her move into her dorm room, Susan pulled me aside. None of this would have been possible without you, she said. The car meant I could work overtime when I needed to. The money from Mom and Dad meant I could help Emily with her expenses. But more than that, you reminded me that I don't have to do everything alone. That's the real gift. A year after that dinner at our parents' house, we gathered again, this time to celebrate their 55th wedding anniversary. The whole family was there, my kids and Susan's kids, and even a few new additions as grandchildren started bringing serious partners to family events. My father stood up to make a toast. His hands shook a little as he held his glass, but his voice was strong. Your mother and I have been blessed with a long life together. We've had our ups and downs like any couple. We've faced hardships and celebrated victories. But the greatest blessing has been watching our daughters grow into the women they are today. Margaret, Susan, you've taught us as much as we've taught you. You've shown us what it means to love unconditionally, to sacrifice for others, to build each other up instead of tearing each other down. He paused, looking at each of us in turn. Life is short and uncertain. We never know how much time we have. What matters isn't what we accumulate or achieve. What matters is how we treat each other, how we show up for the people we love. You girls have shown up for each other, and in doing so, you've honored everything your mother and I tried to teach you. We all raised our glasses and drank to that sentiment. 2 years after I gave Susan the SUV, she got a promotion at the hospital. She was now managing a whole department, using her organizational skills and natural compassion to make a real difference in how the hospital operated. With her increased salary, she was able to move to a better neighborhood, to help her kids with their expenses, to start saving for her own future. One Saturday afternoon, she showed up at my house driving a brand new car. Not an expensive luxury vehicle, but a practical, reliable sedan that was perfect for her needs. I bought it myself, she said proudly. Took me a while to save up for the down payment, but I did it, and I want you to have your SUV back. I shook my head. Keep it. You might need a bigger vehicle someday. Besides, I've gotten used to my simple life. Tom and I share his truck. We take Ubers when we need to, and honestly, it's freeing not having to worry about car maintenance and insurance on 2 vehicles. Are you sure? Positive. But if you really want to do something for me, pay it forward someday. When you see someone who needs help, be the person who helps them. That's all the payment I need. Susan hugged me tight. I will. I promise. And she did. Over the following years, I watched my sister become a source of strength and support for others. She volunteered at a women's shelter, helping women who were leaving difficult situations. She mentored younger colleagues at work. She opened her home to Emily's college friends, who needed a place to stay during breaks. The gift of that SUV rippled outward in ways I never could have imagined. It wasn't just about transportation. It was about dignity, about family, about understanding that sometimes the best thing we can do with a blessing is to pass it along to someone who needs it more. My parents are in their 80s now. My father moves a little slower, and my mother's memory isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, but they're still together, still in that same ick house, still the center of our family. Last month, at our regular family dinner, my father looked around the table at all of us and said, "You know what I'm most proud of in my life? Not my career, not the house, not any material thing. I'm proud that when we're gone, you'll all still have each other. You'll take care of each other the way we tried to take care of you. "You're not going anywhere for a long time," Susan said. But we all knew he was right to think about these things. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. "When the time comes," my father continued, "I don't want you to be sad. I want you to remember nights like this. I want you to remember that love isn't about big gestures or expensive gifts. It's about showing up. It's about seeing what someone needs and finding a way to help. It's about putting someone else's happiness ahead of your own sometimes." He looked directly at me. "Margaret, when you gave Susan that SUV, you didn't just help your sister. You reminded all of us what family really means. You taught us that gifts are meant to serve, not to sit idle. You showed us that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to let go of what we're holding so someone else can hold on. I never expected that giving away a car would teach me so much about life and love and family. But that's exactly what happened. That simple act of kindness opened a door to deeper connections, honest conversations, and a stronger family bond than I'd ever known. Now, when I see Susan driving that SUV, when I watch her help someone else in need, when I see the strength and confidence that came from knowing she wasn't alone in her struggles, I understand what my parents were trying to tell me that day in their living room. The greatest gifts are the ones we pass along. The deepest love is the love we share, and the truest measure of a life well lived isn't what we kept for ourselves, but what we gave away. Sometimes arriving in an Uber instead of an expensive SUV is exactly the right choice. Sometimes the sacrifice we make for others comes back to us, multiplied in ways we never expected. And sometimes, the hardest conversations we dread having turn out to be the moments that define us and strengthen the bonds that matter most. My father was right. None of us expected what would happen when he asked me that simple question on his porch. But I'm grateful he asked. I'm grateful I had the courage to tell the truth. And I'm grateful for a family that understands that love isn't about things. It's about seeing each other, supporting each other, and showing up for each other no matter what. That's the legacy I hope to leave my own children and grandchildren. Not money or possessions, but the understanding that we're all connected, that we all need help sometimes, and that the greatest privilege in life is being able to help someone else carry their burden. The silver SUV my parents gave me is still running strong, still serving its purpose, still spreading the love that came with it, just like family should. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below telling us about a time when someone in your family showed up for you when you needed it most, or when you had the chance to help a loved one in their time of need. Your stories inspire us and remind us all that we're not alone in this journey called life. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to both give and receive love when it matters most.